We will all get through this collectively in time. There will be some casualties, but most of us will get through this and life will begin again.
You must stay at home.
Whatever it takes.
We will beat the coronavirus, and we will beat it together.
Hello, we're back with Ask Dr. Hilary, Coronavirus Explained, where Britain's top medic answers your questions. And Hilary, we are now a week and a half into this historic, unprecedented lockdown. Did just want to kick off by asking about mental health, because so many people I know are suffering psychologically. What's your advice about how we get through that side of this disaster?
I completely understand that everybody has concerns and fears and anxieties about the current pandemic, which is sweeping the globe. We hear statistics that are shocking, and this is unprecedented. No one has lived through this kind of a threat. We can't see the virus. We can't shield ourselves from it, other than doing the very straightforward things like washing hands, using hand sanitizer and distancing ourselves. And even before this pandemic, there were many millions of people who suffered from anxiety, from depression, and we need to make sure that all those people who are vulnerable to mental health issues are protected as much as possible. So I think it's about keeping things in perspective. Whilst we hear the concerns and worries that are being voiced in the media, we need to remember that we have the most fantastic health service, one of the best healthcare systems anywhere in the world. We have millions of dedicated staff, nurses and doctors working within that to keep us safe and to treat us should we become unfortunate and become ill with the virus. We have a social structure which is full of people willing to volunteer and deliver goods and pharmacy and any meds that we might need, and food and supplies. We're conscious that some people are more vulnerable. And I think it's about reassurance. It's about making sure that people know that they're not forgotten, that we're keeping this in perspective. We need to reiterate the positive messages that most people who get this virus will have it mildly and will fully recover, and that we will all get through this collectively in time. There will be some casualties, but most of us will get through this and life will begin again. It might be a year from now, it might be 18 months from now. But in the meantime, we need to love each other, we need to think about each other's welfare, we need to volunteer for each other, connect with one another, connect on the internet or on the phone or on Skype, talk to our friends, talk to people that are vulnerable. We need to, make sure that they feel protected and supported. And I think by keeping our minds busy with little tasks or little projects and new things that we can learn, exercising on a regular basis, because exercise is good, it releases the happy hormones. There is so much we can do. And of course, there are many sources of professional help, charities, GP, 111. If things get really bad, there are many mental health charities that we can connect with, and I think you're going to give a list of these.
Yes, that's right. If you're watching this on YouTube, we'll have them up on the screen, and we'll also include some in our description on YouTube as well. Of course, Hilary, though, there are certain conditions which are particularly exacerbated by a situation like this. So I know someone who's battling contamination OCD, for example, which obviously, with all of the talk about germs, has seen that spiral. Well, what can you do in that situation?
One of the symptoms of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is rituals of hand washing, for example. You get it into your head that you're obsessed with the contamination issue and you can't wash your hands enough. So some people with it would be hand washing every 10 minutes and scrubbing their hands to the point of getting dry skin or even cracking and bleeding. So I think whilst this has raised awareness to the fore, it's all about keeping a perspective. If you're isolating at home, then there's nobody bringing the virus in. Your home is no more contaminated today as it was yesterday. And if you're self-distancing from other people, you're at no more risk. So all the things that you've been telling yourself to try and dissuade yourself from doing, not hand washing too often, it remains the same. As long as people aren't coming into your home and you're not meeting other people, the risk is no greater for you. But of course, everybody needs to, the other people who haven't got OCD need to hand wash more. Those people with OCD keep it the same or slightly
You're already
less.
doing the right thing. Look, we've had so many brilliant questions from you. I'll tell you how you can submit yours because, of course, Dr. Hilary is going to be here every day at the end of the show. First, though, from Sally, and we have changed Sally's name for obvious reasons. She says, I have a 9-year-old daughter who suffers from severe anxiety. How can I help her during this time?
I think you give her a little bit of information that isn't frightening. It can be factual and it can be accurate, but it doesn't need to be frightening. So I think with a 9-year-old who's anxious anyway, you say that there is a nasty bug going around, which is a bit like the flu, which happens every year. But she doesn't need to be too worried because she's staying at home, she's being protected, she's socially distancing, and we will soon get through this. Soon, could mean a few months, but anyway, it's not for the rest of her life. That it's not something hanging over her head that is going to remove her parents from her life or anything like that. So I think it's about, let's talk about a virus for a little moment, but then let's move on to something positive. There's nurses and doctors out there, people doing everything they possibly can, but not dwelling, and certainly not watching too much news. News for the parent that can be disseminated to the child, but really switch the television off because a 9-year-old will pick up on the worst of the stats, and that's what we can protect this 9-year-old from.
Well, good luck, Sally. Very good, sensible question here from John. Is it safe to sit at opposite ends of the garden to my elderly mum without putting her at risk? She is isolated and this would help boost her morale.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I do with my own mum, who's 93. So when I visit her, we will sit outside. We will sit on separate stools over 2 meters apart. She's pleased to see me and I'm always delighted to see her. It gives her a morale boost. It gives me an opportunity to deliver any supplies that she might need. And I'm nowhere near her physically. She understands completely that this is necessary. I can see her face. I can give her a virtual hug from a distance, and I don't stay too long.
But I bet it makes such a difference. How is she coping with all of this,
She's
Hilary,
coping
at 93?
really well. She was a nurse herself, so she gets it straight away. But her phone has never been busier. So she's got her other sons phoning her. She's got friends phoning. She uses the internet. So she's busy. She's socially connecting, but she's not physically in the presence of the virus. And that's the way we must keep it, because at her age, she's a very vulnerable person.
And she must be so proud of you.
So she says.
Next question
I'm proud
on
of her
video
too.
from Kay Milne.
Hi, Dr. Hilary. Just a question. After the lockdown is lifted and we all start going back to work, etc., going out to the shops, what is the risk of another outbreak?
Such a good question. I keep thinking about this, Hilary.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's, we have to wait and see, really.
Yeah. So we're just not going to know at this point.
We're not going to know. Well, we'll see what happens in China first and then Italy. But it's going to be a softly approach. I think a slow release of lockdown.
Teresa Mangan says, my boyfriend lives alone and wants to come stay at my house on a weekend. Will this be safe? Well,
it depends how close they are as a couple, really. If they're very close a lot of the time, it doesn't really matter whether he's at hers or he's at his. If they're close together, they're still not physically distancing. However, if they don't see each other very often, of course, when they are together, they're potentially exposing the other person to the virus. So whilst we don't want couples to split up over the virus, they need to understand that every contact you have increases the risk of it being transmitted. So if they're close and they're seeing each other anyway, doesn't really matter which household they're in, but ideally they should stay in the same household.
David Ballantyne, thank you, David, for your question. Can you catch COVID-19 from your pets going out? And how long would it take to see signs you have the virus if you're one of the very high risk?
The good news is that pets do not seem to suffer at all in terms of symptoms from the virus. So your dog and your cat or your budgerigar or whatever
Are safe.
Are safe. However, of course, if your dog's out partying with other dogs on your walk, then there's a tiny risk that one dog, because the virus can settle on dog fur, for example, if a human being sneezes on the dog, the virus could be transmitted to a second dog, which could be your dog, and you bring the dog home. And it's such a tiny risk that as long as you're washing your hands after petting your dog, if you're washing your hands frequently, you're minimising a minimal risk to even lesser risk. So, in
washing the
theory,
dog, I guess, as well.
Yeah, you shampoo the dog
if
every
I've
now and
been
again.
out.
But I think you've got to remember that the virus is only transmitted to you through your hands touching your face. So as long as you're washing your hands frequently, the infinitesimally small risk of the dog giving it to you needs to be kept in perspective.
Katie Christie asks, what should I be cleaning my baby's hard toys with?
Initially, just soap and water. Soap and water, just as it cleans your hands, it will remove the virus from hard surfaces on the baby's toys. You don't really need to use chlorine products, especially if it's a toy that the baby can put in their mouth. Soap and water's fine. But of course, if you're at home and you're protecting your baby from going out and not meeting other people, there's no way the virus can come in if no one's got it. So because the virus only lives for a few hours on a hard, up to 72 hours on a hard surface, if no one's coming into the house, the toys are pretty safe. But soap and water if you want to be doubly sure.
Simple but important question from Richard Betts, who says, can you cuddle your partner?
Well, that's what your partner's for, isn't it, really? And if you're living under the same roof and in the same household as your partner, then you're not physically distancing. So whether you're the distance we are, Dan, or whether you're cuddling your partner is irrelevant. Of course, partners are living together, sharing the same bed, same bedroom, same cutlery, utensils. You can't physically distance yourself from your important other, your significant other. So the answer is yes, you can cuddle your significant other.
You're in this together.
Absolutely.
No matter what happens. Susan Jones messages to say, what medication should you take while you're self-isolating if you get symptoms of coronavirus? Lots of rumours about, Hilary, about Panadol versus ibuprofen and that sort of thing.
Well, what we know about paracetamol and ibuprofen is quite important. Paracetamol is the best way to treat a fever or any discomfort. The problem with ibuprofen is it's an anti-inflammatory. And you kind of want some sort of inflammatory response if you're exposed to COVID-19. You want the inflammation that your body fights the virus with, and an anti-inflammatory stops that from happening to some extent. Now, if you only had ibuprofen in the house and you weren't sure if you had COVID-19, it would still be better than taking nothing. But ideally, you'd take paracetamol or codeine, and you would treat symptoms like you would any other respiratory infection. So you might want to use a cough linctus, you might want to use a lozenge for a sore throat, or a decongestant for a blocked up nose. The problem is we don't know whether people have got COVID-19 because we don't have enough tests for people with symptoms. But treat the symptoms like you would any other respiratory infection, and you only need to call for further guidance if it gets worse.
And an intriguing final question today from David Biggs. Thank you for writing in, David, who says, is secondhand smoke dangerous given that water droplets are airborne within the exhaled tobacco smoke?
Well, the tobacco smoke's irrelevant, really. If someone's got COVID-19, it is likely to be present in their exhaled breath, whether they're smoking or not. The smoking won't kill the virus. The smoke is mingled with the virus in someone who's got it and is talking or sneezing or coughing. And the same applies to vaping. It would be in the vapour. What I would say, and this is important, is that smokers, long-term smokers, have a worse outlook with the virus than other people. What we see in Italy, one of the reasons perhaps we saw such a high mortality in Italy is because a lot of people smoke in Italy compared to the UK. And smoking is not good for your lungs per se. No. So if you're a long-term smoker, you've already got some lung damage and you've not done yourself any favours.
No, absolutely. I guess what maybe this is about, though, because we're meant to be social distancing even when we're walking, but if someone's smoking on a fag or has their vape out, it can potentially, even if you're 2 meters away, come into your zone. So should we be more worried if we're walking to avoid people smoking or
Well,
vaping?
the vapor and the smoke can travel quite a long way,
Yeah.
but the virus has a higher density, so it will be falling away.
Okay. So you should be okay.
But what's interesting is that you can see how far exhaled breath travels in a smoker. You can actually physically see it. But I would just say, this is another reason for people to think about, never smoking or quitting smoking. Yeah. It might be the last thing on their mind at the moment, but it just goes to show that smoking's bad news.
Yeah. And show some respect if you're out and about. That's my advice. Dr. Hilary, what fascinating questions today. He will be back tomorrow. So if you do want to ask Britain's most trusted medic anything, you can do so right now. You just head to thesun.co.uk/Dr. Hilary. You can also submit questions on Talk Radio's website, and we will be back at the same time tomorrow.